Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Once a year here at MGE, we hold what we call the Owners Conference. Now, this is a 4-day event for MGE power clients, past and present, including new graduates, where we do a bunch of advanced management as well as clinical training. Now, usually at this conference, I dedicate at least a part of my presentation to the state of the dental profession, with a snapshot of industry growth, economic and employment conditions, where is the industry now and where is it going? So obviously this presentation requires a considerable amount of research, and I end up poring over tons of graphs, statistics, studies, white papers, the real fun stuff. Anyway, as I was going through wrapping up my presentation recently, and I was focusing on the area of employment, what's happening with the labor market, I noticed a few new trends that are beginning to take shape with regards to staffing. And staff has always been a problem for the dental industry, as long as I can remember. And the last 3 years, these problems have grown exponentially between a lack of qualified candidates and rising salaries. I mean, it's hard to find a new client who doesn't have some complaint about all of this, or that's staffed to their satisfaction, or fully staffed even for that matter. And this makes sense with how tight the employment market has been. So the question at this point that really matters, especially in a service business, is what should you do about all this so that your office is properly staffed and that your staff's production quality is at a level that works for your business? And that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And why don't we start with a little update as to current conditions as they relate to hiring. So I have some stats here, which I know those are great in a podcast. I'll put links on the episode webpage. But specifically, it's 3 particular stats, which is unemployment, jobs available, and jobs per person. I also have a couple of other metrics. So let's look at the U.S. unemployment rate first. So the graph I'm looking at here goes from July of 2018 through March of 2023. And if you take a look at the unemployment rate, it stayed pretty constant. It drops down to the lowest point since the pandemic in early 2022 last year, and it's stayed more or less static since then. It's down around 3% and change. So that's pretty low. I mean, it's basically at pre-pandemic levels. Then let's take a look at jobs available in the United States. And this is where you see this trend starting to change. So this is employers who have advertised for employees. How many job openings are there in the U.S.? Now, this peaks in the first quarter of January of 2022 with around 12 million, meaning there were 12 million jobs available. 12 million jobs needed to be filled. Since then, it started to drop off, and it dropped off pretty drastically the last 1 or 2 months, and we're now down below, or at a little bit below, it looks like, 10 million. So that's dropped off a bit. So that trend is starting to change. That is headed down, meaning there are less jobs available. So unemployment has stayed constant. Jobs available is dropping off. Now, let's take a look at unemployment versus jobs available. In other words, the number of unemployed people per job opening. So in other words, if there are 2 jobs available, not jobs, 2 jobs available, and there is 1 person, that means that there is half a person for each job. And that makes sense. Or 2 jobs available for every 1 person. Okay, that's obviously a very tight employment market because people have 2 options there in that case on average. Well, this number obviously spiked during the pandemic. There were a lot of people who were unemployed during the early portions of the pandemic in early 2020. Then it plummets down to where it's at about half, meaning that for every 2 jobs, there's 1 person looking for work. And that started around late 2021 and stayed pretty constant up until the last couple months. That number is starting to go up. So right now there is 0.68 approximately people for every 1 job. The last time it was 1-to-1, 1 person unemployed for every 1 job available, was back in 2018. So this trend is starting to spike upwards. There are now more people available for the jobs that are available. It's not quite untight yet, and we're still looking at a fairly tight labor market here, but it is starting to change. Now, there's one other graph here that works with this, and it's from the National Federation of Independent Businesses. I've used these folks' stats before. These are surveys of small business owners. And they have something called the NFIB Hard to Fill Index. And the question at the top of the graph is, Can small businesses hire enough workers? So basically how this graph is interpreted is what percentage of the people surveyed went through the entire month with an open position. So if I have, I'm surveyed by these folks and I was trying to hire, let's say, I don't know, a administrative assistant, and I couldn't fill that position and I was advertising for it. And I would then go on as one of these businesses that could not fill a position. So as it stands now, that peaked back in, again, 2021 at about half the businesses. So half the business surveyed had a position they could not fill. That number is also starting to drop down. It's now getting close to, it was actually around 40% a couple months ago. It's now in the low 40s. So that means that the majority of businesses surveyed did not go through the month with an unfilled position. So this is good. It could also mean that they're not hiring, which is also, that could be bad. Now, so what does this all mean? If you look, basically we still have a tight employment market. We still have a lot of jobs available for the number of people looking for work, but this market is starting to loosen up. Now, will it continue to loosen? I don't know, but it is loosening. And keep in mind, like real estate, there is a regionality to all of this. For instance, in the area that we live here in the Tampa Bay area, the job market seems even tighter than this. Whereas you may go to other areas where there are a lot of people working for work and not as many jobs available. So there is a regionality aspect to this, but this is sort of looking at it on a national level. Now, the interesting point as I went through all of this, so, okay, the labor market's still tight. But then one of the survey points from NFIB, which I really like, because again, this is small businesses. This is you, folks. Okay, maybe not you didn't answer the survey, but this is, business owners in the same boat that you are in, is what's the number one problem facing small business owners right now? Now, last month, number one was inflation. That was the number one answer. What was the biggest problem facing our business? Inflation. What was it this past month, the March 2023 survey? Well, I'll read you this. It says, owners reporting labor quality as their top small business operating problem remains elevated at 23%. This was the number one answer, labor quality. And this comes from the NFIB jobs report. So the number one problem that these small business owners are facing, and I see this with a lot of newer clients and potential clients, is not just I can't find or hire people, it's labor quality. The ability for me to take that person that's just come in and make them work out in my practice. That is the number one problem, the big, big deal. So what does labor quality even mean? Does it have a definition? Well, there's a number of places where it's defined. The one I liked the best actually comes from a report from the National Bureau of Economic Research, and it's a paper. It's either a paper or a book called Productivity Trends in the Goods and Services Sector. And this is actually from 1964. And I liked their definition of labor quality. After in the first chapter, they explain that it's hard to define and there's lots of different ways of defining it and so on. They give a pretty simple formula. This was the formal definition of labor quality. It says, formally, we have defined labor quality as equal to labor input divided by man hours. Labor input divided by man hours. So what does that mean? If I'm a bricklayer, let's say, and you got another bricklayer, and both of us are laying bricks today, and I can and we're in a similar situation. It's not like he's trying to lay bricks on the ceiling here, right? But I'm laying bricks. We're in a similar type situation, and I can lay 60 bricks at an acceptable level of quality, and that individual can lay 30. I have a higher level of labor quality. All right, let's translate this to a dental practice, right? It's basically how much a person produces in a given time. And the key with this is really producing something of value. If I laid those bricks all slipshod, right, and I didn't properly cement them and they were all messed up or whatever, well, okay, maybe I can lay more bricks than the guy who laid 30, but the guy who laid 30 did it right. So those don't have to be relaying. Mine do. So that doesn't count. For something to be quality labor, it has to be done A, right? And then B, it's how much can you do right in a given period of time? How much a person really produces in a given period of time. So you hire two people to do reactivation because, you're going to see whoever does best. So one makes an average of 20 calls an hour and sets 2 appointments. and the other one makes 20 calls an hour and sets 10 appointments, or one only makes 10 calls an hour and sets no appointments. You're getting the flavor here. Obviously, the one who makes 20 calls an hour and gets 10 appointments, that's our better employee. That's our more productive employee. That's the employer of employee of higher labor quality. You could have, what if you had 2 treatment coordinators and one closed 80% of the cases you gave them, and the other closed 30%, and the one who closed 80% collected twice as much? It's the same amount of time. It's just that one treatment coordinator is more effective, gets more done in the same amount of time. Now, the interesting thing about a dental office is some of the positions you're hiring for require some degree of licensure or at least certification, whether it's an X-ray license or someone who's a hygienist or, a doctor, right? Or maybe an EFTA, right? But even there, labor quality, this concept, how much the person gets done in a set amount of time, steps in. With a doctor, it could be production per hour. It could be with a dental assistant, how long it takes for them to make a temp, or with a hygienist, how much they get done in a given allotted amount of time. Same thing. Let's say we have 2 hygienists and it takes one hygienist 2 hours to, do some scaling in one quad, and the other one, it takes an hour, assuming the scaling was done correctly. Obviously, then your labor quality with that hygienist who did it in an hour is better. And look, with these positions too, there's other factors as well. With the hygienist, you might want them to help you contribute to the case acceptance process. Or maybe you require that of your associate. They have to be able to present treatment because that's part of the job. But these are all factors that get, brought into this concept of labor quality. So essentially, if you really look at, if you want to boil this down into a simple thing that we can work with on a day-to-day basis, when we're talking about labor quality, we're essentially talking about performance and statistics. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about labor quality, because all of those things I just mentioned, from the reactivation person to the treatment coordinator and so on to the bricklayer, could all be statusized, all of them. So when we're looking for high labor quality or high quality employees, etc., we're essentially looking for somebody who is very productive and gets a lot done in the time that they are allotted at whatever level that we have deemed to be necessary. But here's the problem. When you're in your hiring process, you're looking for that reactivation person who's going to make 20 calls an hour and schedule 10. You're looking for that treatment coordinator who's going to close 80%. So you interview 30 or 40 applicants and none of them fit whatever criteria you have in your mind. You're essentially looking for the perfect personnel. And that's the wrong way to go about this for a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't exist. You will get lucky once in a while and find somebody who comes in just ready-made, like a new office manager or whatever. We've actually seen this where we'll have a client's office manager that's trained with us that, works in Colorado, and they moved to New York because they're relocating with their husband or wife's job. Well, that's a ready-made office manager. They've already got experiential track in another dental practice and have been successful, and they can jump into a new office. They're already trained and get to work. But how many of those are there? They're not very many. So if you set this idea up in your head that you have to find somebody who's perfect and can do everything perfect, and you've got some kind of undefinable criteria in your mind as to what perfect consists of, you're not going to have the personnel that you're looking for. And then nobody measures up to that so that you feel like you're always settling with whomever it is that you're hiring. The idea is that a great personnel is made. The other thing that can happen too is if you're looking for the perfect person is you can get faked out a little bit. Let's say I interview real well. So you bring me and 5 other people in and I interview hiring a treatment coordinator and I go, yeah, I can close this. I can do that. I did this. I did that. I answer real quick and all that kind of stuff. You go, wow, Jeff's going to be great. And then you actually put me to work and I'm a complete, bomb. I don't work. I can't do what I said I can do. How often have you had somebody interview for a position and then you put them to work and you go, what, did they change personalities after I interviewed them? Where is the person I interviewed? Well, that happens because, people put their best foot forward when they interview. But ultimately, that isn't going to translate just because they interviewed well. That's not going to necessarily translate into excellent performance. So you have to get off the idea of looking for a perfect personnel. You're looking for somebody who's a good fit for your team that you're probably going to have to train. And then you're going to bring them in. You've never worked with this person before, so you're not going to be 100% sold. Obviously, you can really want them to do well, and you can be hopeful that they're going to make it and stuff like this, but you really don't know until they get to work. I've seen people that I've hired who, okay, let's give them a try, and they turned out to be dynamite. And I've had other people who, I thought, wow, this person's going to be great, and they were a complete, dud. That happens. It's real funny, too, because over the years, I've seen it with my executives that I've worked with. You have an exec who has this new hire coming in and their area is overloaded. So they're really excited about this new hire. Wow, this person, do you know this person used to do this? This person used to do that. Oh, this person's going to be amazing. Like they're really excited. Like it's this great movie they're going to go see. And then the person gets to work and it's sort of, like a wet rag. And this person isn't anything like they conceived them to be. And 2 or 3 months later, they're gone. So it's not like I don't get hopeful about new personnel or I'm not excited about new personnel, but really, I'm not sold on a new personnel till I actually see them work and can they work and get the job done. That is the most important thing to me. Not, where you went to school, how long you've been doing this, how many other offices you've done it in. It's, can you actually do the job? Obviously, you have other requirements in your office with certain positions that require licensure or whatever, and that's the case. But even then, you bring in a hygienist, you think you're going to be amazing, and they're just not. So for me, I'm not sold till I've actually worked with them myself, and I see if they can get the job done that I wanted them to get done. So how do we go about solving this labor quality problem if it's such a big problem? Well, obviously, there's a lot to talk about here, but let's cover some of the big picture items. There's actually 4 simple big picture items here. Number 1, you want to make sure that your recruitment, your hiring lines or your hiring process is continuously running, okay? You're continuously on the lookout for good talent, right? If they need licensure, fine. You only hire people that are licensed. You've probably gotten those responses before where you're looking for a hygienist and you get a call. Yeah, I'm responding to your hygiene ad. Okay, great. Do you have a license? No, but I'd like to get one. Anyway. But, in certain cases for administrative positions and in some states, dental assistants, you can hire somebody with 0 experience. Get lots of prospects is the idea. Have lots of options. And then you want to hire somebody who's eager to work and become a part of your team. That's what you're looking for. Now, I'm then going to put them to work and see, how they do, which I'll talk about in a second. But I'm going to bring in the prospects that I think are the best fit. Obviously, I have different criteria I look for when I'm hiring, and it depends on the position. But I'm going to hire them because part of, what people get hung up on is it's almost as if I hire this person, it's like I got married. And again, I'm not trying to denigrate the connection between you and your employees or the employee and the team. With this new personnel, we want to see how is this person going to work out. We don't have a connection to them yet. So they may come in and they don't work out after 2-3 days or a week. We're going to let them go. But people get this real, what word would I use here? It's almost like this big stigma on it. Oh, if I turn over staff, if I bring this person in and they don't work out, I failed. No, you failed if you have the position staying unfilled for long periods of time because you're taking 10 years to find the perfect person. Number 1, right? Or number 2, you also can fail is if you have that stigma, I can't get rid of people because that would look bad. And you leave somebody on the job that's doing a horrid job. Okay. Those both are failure points. So I'm going to bring somebody new in. And if they don't work out, I'm going to move on very quickly. Or, look, but I hope they do. That's the point. It's not like I'm this ruthless, horrible person where I don't want people to work out. Of course, I want them to work out, but I'm also not going to hang on to somebody that isn't working out. So have big, open hiring lines is the idea. Have lots and lots of options. If people meet your basic qualifications and you feel they might be a good fit, give them a try. The worst that's going to happen is they don't fit. And then you move on and try the next person. Now, to that end, part of the issue you may be running into is the number of applicants that you're getting. I've included this in a prior episode, but we have some sample employee hiring ads that I'll give you a download link to on the episode webpage. These are for different positions in the office. You can download those and try them out as you like, if you want to. All right. So assuming you have open hiring lines, what's the next thing you have to be able to do? Your office has to be able to do rudimentary training now more than ever. And I know you've heard this, and it's almost like one of these things, where maybe you have an unhealthy habit. Let's say you should exercise and you don't. People say you should really exercise because it's healthy, and you go, yeah. So conceptually, what they're saying is true, but you're just not going to do it. Well, I kind of get that same vibe sometimes when I talk to especially a newer client about training staff. When am I going to find the time? I don't have time to put together training materials. These people should know what they're doing when they come in. Well, there's a few things. Number 1, especially if you're hiring people with no experience, they're not going to know what to do. And number 2, times have changed. School has changed over the years. Let me give you a silly example. So, Here at MGE, our staff send out emails. They also send out letters. These are business letters, snail mail. That's just normal. You probably do the same thing when somebody refers you a patient. You might send a letter or when if you're a specialist, you might get a new patient from a GP and you send them a thank you for referring letter. So these are business letters. On average, the average younger person coming for a job here at MGE does not know how to write a business letter. I'm not saying that their grammar's bad, but the format that I learned in the 3rd or 4th grade. I was talking about this last night with my wife and a friend of hers that we all learned this in grade school. How do you write a personal letter? How do you write a business letter? To whom it may concern, or dear sir, madam. There's a certain way you do it, colon, not a comma, right? If you're my age or older or maybe a little younger, you probably remember this. Well, the average young person has no idea about this. They've lived off of text and emails. They don't necessarily know that you don't write you, Y-O-U. You don't write a U, you write Y-O-U. Maybe it's not that bad. But you get the idea. So that's something you can teach somebody, assuming that they're eager and willing to learn. No, look, we're sending a business letter out. This is the format of a business letter. It takes 15 minutes. So there may be things that you have to teach people that maybe you didn't have to learn or you learned as part of whatever education that you have that a younger person isn't getting educated on today because times have changed. Well, don't be frustrated about that. They don't know because no one ever taught them. And if they're able to learn quickly, it's easy to teach them. So just you keep your eye out for certain things like this, and you have to have some form of rudimentary training in order to get people on the job. And, as you grow, your ability to train should also be increasing. All right. It's almost like, maybe running. Maybe you decide you want to start distance running and you can only run a mile, and then you can run 2 miles, then you run 5 miles, then you're running, a marathon. You don't just start running a marathon from day one. You build yourself up. So maybe it's a smaller office and the people that you're bringing in have to be a little bit more with it because your training materials are pretty not great. But then as you grow, they become more and more effective. So you can bring in people with even less and less experience. It's sort of like you move yourself up in baby steps, but you're going to have training materials. Maybe you didn't used to, but you are going to have them now. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make great team members. Now, how can you tell if this new hire that you just brought in, that maybe you've given a rudimentary training to, you've shown them around the office and given them a job description or something, how can you tell if they're going to make it? Well, this is where you need statistics. I talked about statistics earlier. That's really how we tell what labor quality is. Okay. That's what stats are for. They're supposed to measure productivity. If I bring in a reactivation person, I could keep statistics on how many calls they make, how many contacts they make, and how many appointments they set, and how many people actually showed up from the appointments that they made. I can measure their productivity. Now, if those statistics are growing, that's good. If they're not, that's not good. You see, like you would expect, it's almost like, if you were to draw a graph, you'd see their area grow. And if you don't add more personnel, let's say it's one person, the growth might stop, but the level of productivity is very acceptable. Do you see? But if you don't keep statistics, you're never going to know if people are producing or not. That's a large part of our program, is training on how to manage by statistics. One is keeping them, but the number two is knowing what to do when they look a certain way, right? If they're going up, down, etc. But if you don't even keep statistics, that's like driving your car with all your instrumentation in the trunk. How fast am I going? I don't know. Am I out of gas? Don't know. What's the engine temperature? Oh, no. Like, you can't drive a car that way. You need to have these things. Otherwise, you don't know what's happening. So the same thing applies with an office. This is why you need stats. And you can even use this with newer employees. I've mentioned before, if you're going to bring a new employee in, let's say you're an established office and you have 3 or 4 administrative staff, and maybe you're looking for a new receptionist, right? And your scheduler is answering the phone right now or whatever. Okay. So you bring in a new employee. Who's slated to be the receptionist. I probably would not have them answering my phone right off the bat. Talked about this before, because the person answering the phone is the first impression of the practice. They're also essentially my partner in practice marketing. So if they are completely horrible, they're basically wasting all my marketing money. But I have to see, is this person a worthwhile hire, right? So how am I going to see if they're a worthwhile hire? How productive are they? So, okay, let's say I have some inactive patients and I decide, you know what? Let's see how they do. I'm going to have them do some reactivation calls. Obviously, that's not difficult to learn. You could show them how they would schedule a hygiene appointment, how long you schedule a hygiene appointment for. Oh, this person hasn't had an exam for 5 years. They need a new initial, so that's going to be this long of an appointment. showing a person these things is very easy because the idea of going to the dentist, a couple times a year for a checkup is a pretty commonly accepted, we've all had them. So this isn't like you're explaining something that they've never had done before, like an implant, right? So this is very easy to teach somebody. Then you can teach them how to do this and you do a little bit of role playing with them. You're the patient, then you're a little bit more of a difficult patient. Then you just put them on the phones. Now, obviously I'd want them to know what the name of the office was and stuff like this, right? You don't want them to sound completely ridiculous so that they end up making you look bad to your patients, but you give them enough information to at least schedule an appointment. They know how to put it in the software or whatever it is that they are supposed to do. So now you put them on the phone and they start making phone calls. If they don't start making some appointments soon, then they're probably not going to make it on any other position I give them in the practice because they can't get anything done. I'm looking for at least a promise of labor quality here. Can I make this person more effective? Can I teach them to communicate better? Can I teach them to sell better? Of course I can. But I want to at least see, can this person get a product? If they can't get a product, why am I going to waste my time by keeping them around for months and months and months so that they continue to not get a product and I have to pay them? So if I have them on the job for a week or two and they're making a bunch of appointments and these patients start to show up, I might go, okay, good. There's a good personnel. Let's train them from other jobs in the office. Whereas I put somebody else on that job and they can't make appointments or they go, yeah, I don't like being on the phone. We've seen this before. I've seen people hire schedulers who don't like being on the phone. Like, what is that? Right? But I want to see, can this person actually make appointments? Can they get any kind of a product? Because if they can, then this is potentially a good employee and I'm going to invest some time into training them. So it's sort of the third thing. I need to have stats. I need to measure people's productivity, right? Because if I can't, I'm not going to know whether they're doing a good job or not. It's completely arbitrary and based on my opinion. And if I'm bringing in new people, I want to see, can they perform at all before I start giving them more and more responsibility in the practice. There's nothing worse than having someone who's a non-performer and giving them more things that they're responsible for. So I have more things that are not being performed. Now, also, as far as statistics to keep in the office, I'll give you another download here. We have statistics to keep as a little handout. I'll put it on the download link on the episode webpage. These are stats that you should be keeping regularly in your practice if you want to have a crack at them. All right, this brings us to our fourth point. Don't rationalize with any of this, okay? A lot of what I'm describing to you is very easy to do. If you put somebody on the job and you're having them, make reactivation calls, don't get into all the reasons why it can't be done because then you're pretty much sunk, right? So let's say I hire a schedule coordinator and they've got some experience and I've trained them on how to do it in my office. And then I see the schedule is empty with a lot of openings and the production is starting to go down. Now, what you'll find with most personnel, and this doesn't necessarily make them a bad person, okay? But you go to them and you go, what's going on? They're not going to say, oh, well, I'm not making enough phone calls, or I don't know how to handle people who won't schedule an appointment, or, I should be, I'm goofing off and talking to the other staff members when I should be on the phone. They're not going to necessarily say that. What you're going to get is explanations for ineffectiveness. Well, people just don't want to schedule right now. The economy is tough. You can't tell people they have to come in the morning. That's when they go to work. In other words, they're assigning the reason or the responsibility for all this to other things as opposed to owning these problems themselves. Don't buy into that. I've seen people buy into that where, a scheduler will tell them, well, no one wants to come in the morning because they have to work or whatever. And a doctor changes their entire scheduling policy because they can't schedule patients in the morning. Here's the truth. That scheduler couldn't schedule patients in the morning. People schedule patients in the morning all the time, but it was that scheduler who couldn't. Don't change your entire office for one person. Just like if you had a treatment coordinator, maybe they're not closing anybody. Oh, well, no one's getting approved. Nobody wants to pay. People want to just do what insurance covers. Again, and you have to be able to see if these things are true for yourself. But when you see this type of thing happening and you buy it and you change as a result, this is when you get into big trouble. So don't rationalize with it. You put somebody on a job. You see if they can actually produce. You have a statistic. You keep a statistic. Is their area growing or expanding? Good. If it's not, get somebody who can make that area grow, expand, or debug that employee a little bit, their performance, so that they can get their area expanding again. Now, of course, you as the boss have to provide a mission, a clear division of labor. Everybody has to have a specific job that they're responsible for. You have to have room for growth. You have to be a decent leader. How can you hold other people to account if you don't hold yourself to account? If you're late or you're doing things that you wouldn't expect your team members to do, well, that's just not going to fly. You have to set an example. I know it sounds very trite, but it's extremely true. You have to walk the walk. You can't just talk. You have to do what you say you're going to do. And look, there's a lot to all these points, but these are some of the basics. This is how you improve labor quality, which is right now the biggest problem that small business owners are facing. It is fixable. It just takes a little bit of work. It's a pretty easy problem to solve. And there's really no reason to go unstaffed or understaffed really ever from this point forward. Now, if maybe you listen to this and you go, gee, my name is now Greff. You go, gee, Jeff, that sounds great, but I don't know where to start or I don't know what to do. Here's my suggestion. We do what's called a free practice evaluation or analysis. I'll put a link for it on the episode webpage. We'll take a look at what's going on in your office and we can tell you, what's your next move to achieve the goals that you're setting for yourself. You can check that out. Or you can always, if you have questions about any of this, you can always email me directly at jeffb@mgeonline.com. Anyway, I hope this helps. I have the links on the episode webpage for the employment ads, the stats to keep in the office, as well as the practice analysis. And listen, folks, to all you guys, I really, really, really appreciate you guys listening. And if you want, don't take a chance. If you can, don't forget to follow us or subscribe to us, depending on the podcast platform you're listening to. Maybe leave some feedback. And if you have any questions, you can give us a call here at MGE at 800-640-1140 or visit us online at mgeonline.com. Folks, have a great week. I'll see you the next episode.